I don't know how to turn it on. Hello? Now can you hear me? Maybe if I get it down by it, it's good. Should I start? Okay. Hi, I'm Tony Swanby, and I have the immense privilege of introducing my friend Bianca Tomasini. Bianca has had a long career as a research scientist, biotechnology, biochemistry, and a few years back, she took a career change path and went to work as an organizer for Voces de la Frontera, which is an immigrant advocacy organization here in our community and in Milwaukee and really beyond, right? So during that time, Bianca had this really great idea and really inspired idea that she needed to produce a video, to get a video made, to speak about our beliefs in Jesus Christ and welcome our undocumented neighbors. And she was highly motivated about the Christian nationalist right-wing rhetoric against immigrants and against others. And so this video that Bianca is going to show you is the result of that work. And then she's going to lead us in a question and answer sessions about how we as believers in Jesus Christ address things when we come across this travesty in discussing our undocumented neighbors. Okay.
And hopefully at the end I can also I'm Bianca, and we could also I'll try to also tell you a little bit about Voces de la Frontera, because I think that would be good to explain what they're doing, what they're hoping for right now. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. Okay, yeah.
The population around here is very diverse. We do have people that really come from all over the place, other parts of the country, other parts of the world. So we do have a rich history of welcoming immigrants. Jesus welcomed all people, and especially those who were at the margins. And so when we start making assumptions about a group of people and we start to dehumanize them by calling them they, that is a very dangerous thing to do. As I said, I think really goes against the scriptures and what Jesus calls us to do, to be welcoming of all, to be accepting of all. Because after all, everybody is our neighbor. There is no us and them. There is just us together.
Teacher, which commandment in the laws is the greatest? Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments.
The video you're about to watch asks you to truly see the humanity of a group of people, our neighbors in Wisconsin, who are often misrepresented by some politicians and media outlets. I ask you to open your hearts and minds to the truth that Jesus taught us, that no matter where we live or who we are all connected and are here to love each other, to love our neighbor.
2013, the state of Wisconsin, Latinos became the second largest ethnic racial population in the state of Wisconsin, signaling that it was following that demographic shift, those patterns that were taking place for decades in the Southwest, in Nueva York, and in Florida, are now taking place here in Wisconsin.
These amazing LED light bars bring any dark space to life and cost just $40. No wire.
There are about 75,000 immigration unauthorized brothers and sisters in Wisconsin, many of whom have been with us for decades.
Yo nací en Irimbo, Michoacán, México. Cuando yo estuve con mis papás, para mí fue una vida excelente. Mi papá era una persona muy trabajadora, nos enseñó a luchar por la vida. Y de allí, pues, pasé mi niñez, pasé mi adolescencia. Se llegó el momento en que tomé la decisión de casarme. En el 96 mi esposo falleció. Me quedé sola con mis hijos, sin casa, en la calle. Era cuando yo sufrí mucho porque mis hijos dormían sin comida. Me pedían comida y no la tenía. De allí dos muchachas me invitaron, Lupe, vámonos a Estados Unidos. Me vine. Llegué aquí a Chicago, duró un tiempo. Según yo, venía por 2 años.
Hace 19 años. 19 años que estoy aquí. Y de verdad que venía por 2 años y ya tengo 19 años acá. Yo en mi país dejé a mi mamá, dejé a toda mi familia, mis hermanos, mis hermanas, pues toda mi familia. Aquí en Estados Unidos no tengo familia.
I came to the United States when I was 4 years of age with my mother, and I've been here ever since. My family decided to leave our home country because over there's not many like educational opportunities for you to better yourself. And also at that time, there wasn't many good paying jobs, so it was hard to sustain a family over there. And so that's why we came over here to the United States to have a better life.
Cuando iniciamos el cruce de la frontera, veníamos, la persona que nos acompañaba venía con nosotros. Llegamos a un espacio horrible. Había serpientes, había animales que corríamos el peligro de que nos mordieran, nos picaran, pero así pasamos esa frontera, sin comer, sin tomar agua. Pero yo no me importaba no comer, no me importaba la sed que traía, sino venir a luchar por mis hijos para poderles arrimar una comida, para que por lo menos eso tuvieran.
Yo crucé la frontera de una manera muy drástica. Porque me vine por el cerro. Me vine primera vez vine con unos polleros, pero el pollero nos abandonó y tuvimos que caminar muchas horas hacia la carretera para poder pedir ayuda, agua incluso, y eso fue la primera vez. Nos agarró la policía y nos llevó a la frontera y nos regresó para atrás. Pero pues yo volví a insistir y pues a la tercera vez pasé. Pero sí fue un viacrucis porque en el camino pues se quedó un centroamericano que ya no pudo continuar porque ya no podía, entonces lo abandonaron ahí, pero nosotros cruzamos la frontera. Es bastante peligroso y la verdad es tremenda experiencia cruzar en la frontera así.
No Nobody wakes up one day and says, today is the day that I will leave my country. I will leave what I know, what I love, you know, where I'm from, to go work in an industry that will exploit me.
I would venture that most farms, if they're hiring high schoolers, they're paying probably anywhere from $10, $12 an hour. But no one can live at $10, $12 an hour. I mean, even, so to say, undocumented immigrant labor that is working for these dairies, they're just, they're being exploited. 900 dairy farms are producing, I think, close to 70% of the milk in the state. Rather interesting, the undocumented people that are doing this, estimated by economists, is roughly 7,900. 7,900 undocumented people are the basis for 11% of the state gross product.
80% of Latinos, the Latino workforce works in essential jobs, would have been as essential during this pandemic. In the state of Wisconsin, we know that Latino workforce can be found in larger numbers in certain industries. For example, in agriculture as an industry, in the construction as an industry, in the service industry, in the hotel industry. So these are industries that employ large numbers of Latinx immigrant workers, which many of those within that population are considered unauthorized immigrants. We know that in Wisconsin, there's approximately 400,000 Latinos, 27% are immigrants. If we take in the undercount demographers tell us about, that could be up to 18% more than that number. We know that in Wisconsin, also in the K-12 public school system, there's 100,000 Latinx students in the state of Wisconsin. We know that the vast majority of dairy industry workers, those that milk the cows, those that care for the flock, are Latino, and the majority are immigrants, with a large percentage of them undocumented. It's ironic that the industry that gives Wisconsinite much of their collective identity only survives and thrives because of Latinx, immigrant, and mostly undocumented workers. The dairy industry would not be able to function without the workforce that it has. The dairy industry, it would collapse. Quite simply, there would have to be massive recruitment efforts of workers by the dairy industry, for example.
Las vacas que ya su producción es menor y puede ser por dos razones. Una, que la vaca está enferma, y otra, que ya su periodo de lactancia ya va disminuyendo. Y ese es el motivo por el cual ustedes pueden ver aquí el material que yo utilizo para poderlas yo tratar.
Food has been highly dependent on Latino, immigrant, and non-immigrant labor, you know, for well over a century. Not just here in Wisconsin, but across, at least moving west, who are recruited to come work in the food industry, in packaging the food, for example, in the beef processing industry, in the pork processing industry, that are year-round workers, right? As well as we look at plants, for example, in Milwaukee and Green Bay. And if we talk to the folks that work there, the majority will speak to you in Spanish because that's who the workforce is.
If you're thinking about buying solar panels, don't. The U.S. government will literally buy them for you.
This is a dairy farm. We produce milk from about 450 dairy cows. So my parents moved here. They moved here in 1968 and started farming here. And I was born in 1969 and have been farming here my whole life. Most of our employees are from Mexico. At this point, I only have one employee who was born here in the United States, but everybody else that works here was in fact born in Mexico.
For the most part, our Mexican employees have been very, very good employees. And I think part of that is because a lot of the folks that I've had come to work for us are very focused on doing their job and doing it well and making as much money as they can, because oftentimes they're supporting family back home. And they have a vision, they have a dream, they're driven, you know.
Mi trabajo básicamente es dependiendo del turno que yo me encuentre. Si estoy en la mañana, yo tengo que estar atento al grupo de ordeñas, porque yo, aparte de estar vacunando, aparte de estar checando las vacas su salud, yo tengo que también observar la calidad de la leche.
Immigrants, workers, and immigrant undocumented workers are absolutely essential to the economic stability of our state and our country. Without immigrant labor, many of the necessities that we take for granted are not there. And were studies of workers across the country and who were the essential workers, really. And once those studies started to show, we start seeing just how important this workforce is to the vitality of our population. Now let's layer that with this conversation about taxes, that Latinx immigrants, undocumented workers do not pay taxes or are freeloaders. They're here to steal your jobs. They're here to freeload off the system. And we have been saying this for decades. Is simply not true. We know that you don't qualify at this point for most, federal and state benefits if you don't have a social security number.
Nosotros, así hacemos impuestos. Desde que venimos acá, yo creo que el primer año, hicimos lo de las taxas y seguimos haciendo taxas. Todos los inmigrantes hacemos taxas.
Yo no he recibido una ayuda de gobierno, yo no he recibido nada de nadie. ¿Por qué? Por lo mismo, porque no tengo derechos. Solicito un servicio médico, no tengo derechos, no me lo aprueban. Yo pago mis impuestos, yo aporto cada que es necesario, a mí no me da nada. Todo lo que yo tengo, lo que no tengo, lo que disfruto, me cuesta trabajo ganarlo y tenerlo.
The misconception that undocumented people don't pay taxes is completely false. We do pay taxes and we contribute to the community as much as anyone else does.
Undocumented workers are taxed just like anybody else, right? And then we're just talking about the tax while they're working, right? So they're taxed federal taxes, they're taxed state taxes, payroll taxes, and do not have access to any of these services or any of the benefits that come from those taxes. So that right there is one of the big ironies that folks don't like to talk about, is that undocumented workers literally pump billions of dollars into the social security system that benefits, our elderly folks, our retired folks in this country that they will never have access to at this point.
In our area right now, there's plenty of jobs for everyone. There's more than enough jobs to go around. And I don't care where you came from or what color you are, there is work out there if you're willing to work. There's no doubt about that. This notion that, immigrants are taking, quote, our job, we've not found that to be the case. And prior to hiring people, from outside the country, obviously we tried to procure employees from wherever we could, but, we just didn't have a lot of people necessarily applying. That didn't seem to matter as far as pay or, it just was tough, tough finding people.
El inmigrante viene a hacer un trabajo que nuestros compañeros americanos no quieren hacer. El inmigrante, él no le importa si hay lluvia, nieve, tormenta, él está en el trabajo. Más en las lecherías, tú vas a las lecherías, a los ranchos grandes y tú ves puros inmigrantes. No le importa trabajar 12, 20 horas, ellos están ahí, están ahí.
I think a lot of people in Wisconsin still have the idea that we are just here to steal their jobs. I think that if anything, we're the ones that are doing the dirty jobs, the jobs that Americans don't want to do. And the statement that we're the ones stealing the jobs, I think is very racist.
At this parish, we have interesting mix of population, like the majority are Hispanic people. I would say 85% are Hispanic, 5% are African American, and the 10% are Anglo people who participate actively here at this parish. In the Catholic faith, I would say one of our strengths is precisely taking care of the poor. In that group, we include also the immigrants, those who are in need, because it's one of the things that, one of the works of mercy, to give place and to give house or to welcome those who are strangers, those who are immigrants. They come here because they don't have any other options. And they come here because they need to raise their families. Sometimes they bring their families, sometimes they work here and send money back to their families. And we understand that as part of our mission of welcoming strangers in the church.
For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. The king will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.
The First Baptist Church has about 150 years, relocated in the mid-1900s here to this more suburban area. I hear certain phrases a lot directed towards immigrants. Sometimes they come from our politicians, that immigrants are dangerous people, that they are rapists and murderers. I hear people say a lot, well, just come here the legal way. I hear people say a lot, just come and learn our language. And we make assumptions a lot about people who are different from us. And my message for those who are tempted to say things like that is get to know people, build relationships. That is something in Christian circles that we are called to do. And I guarantee once you get to know people for who they are, a lot of that way of thinking falls away.
People emigrate from their countries of origin because they are desperate. They are fleeing because their lives are in danger, or they cannot find employment and or cannot feed their children. People from certain countries cannot immigrate to USA legally because, number one, wait times for immigration visa availability for people in certain countries exceed 20 years. Number two, there is currently no path to U.S. citizenship for those in the U.S. who are undocumented. There is no affirmative way to apply to fix your status under current law. Number three, those who might qualify as a family member of a lawful permanent resident or a U.S. citizen face many barriers due to prohibitive eligibility requirements. Immigrating legally to the U.S. is close to impossible for people in desperate situations.
The immigrants that I've met are people who want to know more about God, who want to know how to do acts of compassion. There are people like you, there are people like myself. Jesus included anyone and everybody who wanted to be, to belong. It comes out of our tradition, out of scripture, that immigrants must be welcome, that we must be people who bring in, just hospitality. No matter the differences, we are called to show God's love, to show God's justice, and to include them, to listen to their stories. And we are encouraged to see how God is working in their lives. in the past 2 years that I've been here in Wisconsin, a lot of comments about what if I get deported? What happens if tomorrow, I can't make it back to my home? So there was a lot of conversations around that. Just encourage anyone who is watching this to know that the immigrant families that I've met are people who are striving to be better amid a lot of issues that they may be having.
I wish we would get to a point where we would just recognize that all people in this country, regardless of citizenship, regardless of immigration status, have a right to have dignified lives. People have a right to education. They have a right to dignified workplaces. People have a right to be able to live without fear.
During my high school years, I still didn't have DACA. So I was not able to get any scholarships because of the requirement to have a social security number, because of the requirement to be a US citizen, documented immigrant. It was 10 times harder for me, and it just limited my resources. You can't do FAFSA, you can't get any money, like any federal money for college. On top of that, as an undocumented student, a lot of public schools, which are more affordable, actually require you to pay out of state tuition. So that's another thing. It's like you have to pay double of what you can't already afford.
Pues gracias a Dios, mis hijos trabajan, yo trabajo, nos apoyamos. Lo único que me afecta aquí es no poder estar libremente, salir sin miedo, salir sin precaución de que qué va a pasar si me detienen por no licencia.
Racism and xenophobia have plagued our country for centuries. This idea that we can justify the exploitation of people based on their ethnicity, based on their race, based on where they were born, or where their ancestry is something that continues to harm us as a society. Mm-hmm. It's something that we as individuals deal with on a daily basis. And hopefully, I am hopeful that there is change coming for our country that would benefit everybody, because generations change and people change and ideas change and culture change, and they tend to move away from the rhetoric of hate.
Yo lo más importante en mi vida, pediría hasta con lágrimas de mis ojos, con mi corazón en la mano, que no nos ignoren, que no nos discriminen, que nos den una ciudadanía para que tengamos un futuro eficaz, un futuro mejor, y que seamos más tomados en cuenta.
My dream as an undocumented student is to just have a better life and to be able to contribute to my community. But also as a nurse, I'm hoping to stay here in Wisconsin after I graduate and work as a nurse in Wisconsin. And so I think that a message that I would give to them is that a lot of us are here not because we want to, but because we don't have a choice. But we are still contributing to the community, opening up resources, opening up businesses that is going to help everyone, because we also contribute to the community as a whole.
Hay de todo en este país. Ahí tenemos gente que le caemos bien, americanos que les caemos muy bien y americanos que pues, nos ven como siempre como extraños. Y ya no somos extraños en este país. Somos una gente que aporta algo de su cultura, que aporta su esfuerzo para que llevemos un producto a la mesa, ya llámese vegetales, llámese lechería, queso. Es muy extenso porque en todas las áreas están los inmigrantes.
Our sacred scriptures are full of examples that teach us how to treat immigrants as our neighbors. And that is throughout our Hebrew scriptures and as well as our Christian scriptures. And in fact, even Jesus talks about this in the Gospels. And this is what is really meant when we say, love your neighbors, because immigrants of all kinds, including undocumented immigrants, they live among us. They are our friends, they're our neighbors and our coworkers. They're sitting in our very pews in our churches, worshiping with us. They are just as much a part of our community as anybody else. And so when Jesus says, love your neighbor, that really means everybody.
So there are some questions that are coming up, and I thought that maybe we could take them if there is time, one by one, but then at the end, I would like a more general discussion about what we as Christians could do and what actions we can take. And I just wanted to say something that maybe I from the beginning. So this church, I think, is perhaps you don't need to hear all these messages here because we have pastors and the ELCA who are about love, right? I think, and promoting Jesus's teaching. But what really motivated to pursue this with Johnny Munoz, the videographer, was the hateful rhetoric that was coming out from 2015, and how people, undocumented persons who are not asylum seekers and they're not refugees, so nobody's advocating for them, how difficult their lives are, how traumatized those children are going to be and are constantly when their parents might be deported any day. They don't have access to driver's licenses in the state of Wisconsin. So the idea at the end of this is, let's please see what actions we can take, So anyhow, so this is, so Pastor Ruiz Velasquez, a friend of mine, he and I came up with these questions for reflection. So I was just curious, what are your biggest or most surprising takeaways from this video, if any? If we could have anybody say, did you know? Yeah. Love your neighbor. Please wait on the mic.
I know that my relatives had farms and people would come and work for them.
Mm-hmm. So it's not surprising to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think, and then I also was thinking, well, we have also Tony here showing in this, that's an example, right, of how to, yeah, like a vivid example of how to, yes, truly love your neighbor. And but those people in farms, sometimes, you know, the owners, we found two that were very supportive, but they will go and eventually vote for people who are going to make undocumented persons' lives very difficult. And that's the disconnect that I would like us to talk about, because that's, those same people will go to church and, you know, have Christian church. And so I think the reason for some of the aspects here that are not necessarily, oh my God. Oh. Oh, hello. Oh, so lovely. Oh my goodness. Oh, welcome. Oh, yeah.
So Bianca,
Yeah.
here.
Oh, sorry.
So one of my biggest takeaways, I think, is just learning how impossible it is for these people to come in the legal way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, so many people, that's their biggest, like, well, they should come in the legal way.
Right.
Well, if you look at it, as you pointed out here, with our current law, it's impossible.
Yeah, no, it's been made very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Over the decades. So I'm from Mexico, and I remember, so the border used to be a very fluid place, and people were, and I think still are, recruited into some industries. You know, the employers would go to Mexico, still some of them I think do, and bring people, and they might have certain permits. But for the most part, there was like an essential agreement. There was like more openness to this idea that, okay, we need labor here. And in Mexico, we need jobs. There's tremendous underemployment. And so there was like a certain, maybe perhaps even tacit agreement. I'm not sure what the level of openness, but then it got more and more difficult for people to get here legally, and then they were persecuted, and there was this militarization of the border, and and then I think people, even the ones who have been here for 20 years, 30, they're like stunned. It's like, what's going on? Why are we so hated? We are, and then you have this contrast. We're producing your food here, you know, and responsible for all aspects of the food chain. That's just my, but yeah, it's very, very difficult. Nobody who lives in the countryside in Mexico who cannot feed their children are going to have the wherewithal to apply for a visa, wait 20 years for them.
Yeah.
You know,
Because when you're in crisis, you don't have 20 years.
yeah, your children are hungry, and you need to do something.
I think that was the problem in the chat.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. This is really, really good. And I wish this could be shown on a national, audience, because I think already two big myths were exposed that they don't pay taxes.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I've heard these things many times. One is even a neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
And he just has this grudge about, he's prejudiced because of these lies that are pervasive, and that they're taking away American jobs. That was a very good explanation of that by the dairy farmer.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think, and it's, we have 2.7% on unemployment, and there's a very low level of unemployment in Wisconsin. And I just wanted to focus on Wisconsin because those are the people
I should know. I've been in this country my whole life, but I haven't really studied. I'm embarrassed to say, what exactly does undocumented mean, and how do they get documented?
Right. So undocumented really means immigration unauthorized. So they don't have immigration papers. However, I kind of refuse to use that word for them, even though that's the standard, because they are documented. They do pay taxes. They have an ITIN number, which then that's what is being used for them to pay taxes. And they do it because they want to have their salary, and they want to be here, and they would like a path. They would like a path to be able to stay here legally. It's just impossible. I mean, why can't they get what? Sorry? Because immigration law is very prohibitive. If you did not come into the country with a visa or with a visa, you can't. There's no way. I think I think if somebody has been, of course, if somebody marries a US citizen, that's a way. If somebody has a child here, then they can wait 18 or 21 years for that child to claim them as a family member. I think if you've been the victim of a crime by a US citizen, then you have a path. There is no reasonable, humane, dignified path.
I mean, just to add to that, if you're DACA, it's a special program, but still they're not allowing DACA people to become permanent right now. Right. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but
no, that is correct. So, and it's always changing, right? So my friend Luis, he's a DACA recipient as well. Deferred arrival, deferred action for childhood arrivals. And it means that there's a certain group of, so Obama during his tenure had this, I think it was an executive order that he would defer action, is that deportation would be deferred for these group of people who happen to come to the United States between a certain, I don't know exactly the requirements, but they're very strict. They have to be here before the age of such and such, and they had to come into the country during this and that year, and they have to be studying or employed, or they have to have absolutely not a mistake can be made. You don't get a ticket. You don't get those people live like ultra impeccable, stressful lives, and their lives are in limbo all the time.
But they basically came here as young people.
Yes,
had
they were
no
brought by their
choice. They
parents.
came as very young
Yeah.
people. They've lived here their whole lives. Their native language is now English, although they probably are bilingual some.
Yeah.
And they have, and legally, if DACA goes away, they'll be deported back to some country that they've never lived in.
Correct.
And that's our law right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And not even that can be made to pass, like to just give it so-called immunity to I think Tony wanted to say something.
So the whole driver's license thing is a really big deal. We don't allow immigrants, undocumented immigrants, to get driver's license, but they have to get to jobs. They have to go to work. So just think about that, all the fear that you would have that you have a headlight out and you could get deported. Just think about living like that all the time.
Yeah, it's tremendously stressful for
terrible.
them and for their children who don't know if their parents will be there when they come back. And that's what happened. I think there was a raid. There was a raid in 2018 in Madison. I think they took 80 people and and that it was like tremendous commotion in the schools, and tremendous fear was elicited. And we have a pretty, I would call, or we had at that time, a police chief who was not out to get immigrants, but that is only in Dane County for the most part. Other counties there's a law called 287G, which allows the sheriffs of particular country, of whichever county decides to do this, to designate or to act as ICE agent. So they can choose, okay, somebody looks like they might be undocumented, or they get deputized to then call ICE, and then that person's life is, that's it.
Bianca, it seemed to me that some of the speakers in the video were taking a lot of risk by speaking publicly. Is that your sense too?
Yeah, these are people who are just like, I mean, especially she's very outspoken, with like a different life for her children. I mean, she's risked her life. Obviously, they all did to come here. Yes, right. And yeah, she agreed to have her name here, and also the gentleman who was talking about the industries and how much immigrants provide that. Yeah, he also said, yeah, use my name, but the person working in the dairy farm did not want his name out. So
Bianca, I don't have any answers. I just have thoughts and worries. I appreciate seeing this film, and I'm pretty much aware of the many problems, though I'm not active in this arena. But my brain is such that I'm thinking, what are the overarching kinds of things, and sort of in order of priority to these excessively complex and painful and traumatic situations that need to be put down in black and white in a way that throughout, for example, the ELCA, to begin with, at a minimum, need to be looked at, thought about. And what here in Wisconsin can we and should we be doing? And what are the first things to attack? The license, for sure. And you would know, but to me, as an advocate, regardless of the arena, and this is a tremendously big one, and it means there's a lot of power in high places that are making sure this all continues to happen.
Correct.
In the way that it is happening. So that's kind of my, off the top of my head, concerns, suggestions, when I'm not involved because I've got many other big things to be involved in.
I understand. So I don't know, maybe we should just head to that. Yeah, because so I can tell you, I was at a Voces meeting yesterday. So they are really pushing, there's a budget, there's a state budget being discussed, right? And Governor Evers has put the procurement of licenses for undocumented persons in that budget, as he did 4 years ago or whenever he did. So 2 years ago. So you know, I know this is for 501c3, but I'm just gonna say it as it is, because it is the Republicans who do not want this to be there. Yes, so they actually have met with leaders of Voces de la Frontera and say, yes, we hear from the farmers. We hear that we need these licenses, you know, because there's the hypocrisy. We need the labor, but we don't want the people. Right? That's what they're saying. Yeah, so anyhow, what they were told is we do not want to give Governor Evers victory here, because this would be a good thing for our, so they apparently might initiate a separate bill, finally, that might actually lead to licenses. But what we need to do, I think, is it's hard to be in Madison because most of our representatives are very supportive. You know, I'm like, but it doesn't hurt to call. It doesn't hurt to call. And it definitely helps and make them like aware that this is something that you think about. You know, the people in our community are suffering and they are stressed, and we love our neighbor and we would like them to be, you know, treated fairly. And but the most, I think, important, and Tony has done this really well, is to talk to your family, to talk to people in the rest of Wisconsin, because those are the people that we need to have their minds, their hearts changed. So the idea was to have this video shown in churches elsewhere in Wisconsin to people who only like watch, you know, let's say Fox News, and have like a different perspective brought to them. But also we here could, and I say we, but I don't have relatives in Wisconsin or I don't have other, you know, I don't, but if you do, talk to them, please. I think that's and Tony would be better at explaining how and how to do that.
So I had a really interesting experience a couple weeks ago. I went to my father's youngest, my father passed away many years ago, and his youngest sister died, and I went to her funeral in Medford, Wisconsin. And I have many cousins, and a bunch of them were at that funeral. And my father's family was always at odds with each other, and so I haven't been in touch with them at all. But my one cousin lives in Mount Horeb, and she and I rode up to the funeral together. And she is of the same mind as me, but she was just asking me about my life. And so I told her about that guy back there and the whole story. Well, then we got to the luncheon after the funeral, and my other cousins, and then she also told me about the political beliefs of the rest of her family. And we got to the funeral lunch, and they started asking me about my life. So I told them about Ngwa and what had happened. And my one cousin, Jim, said, why in the world would you do that with those people? It was just like, and I said, because I believe in Jesus Christ, who says, welcome the stranger, right? If you go to church, don't you hear, love your neighbor, welcome the stranger, feed the poor, feed the hungry, help the poor? Don't you hear that? And they all nodded. And then I shut up. I thought that was as good as it was going to get at that point, I think. There was a lot more, but you just have to say what you think, what you believe, what you know Jesus to be.
Yeah, it's just, it is amazing how the Bible can be interpreted, how you can take so many different, ways of, and maybe these things are not emphasized in all churches. I think that's the, the basic teachings of Jesus, maybe are not emphasized. We talk about it, or they talk about a bunch of other things that might not be. Yeah. So yeah. So if you're going to go to the next one.
I'm glad you included the student as well.
Oh,
Hear her perspective and
yeah.
things again we take for granted. Oh, I'm sorry. Eat the mic. I just said I was really glad they included the voice of the student, and I thought that right away. These people are all taking a big risk by being on this, and I appreciate and hearing her perspective and things that we take for granted, and not having access to scholarships and other opportunities to driving, even, and so I'm really glad that you also included her voice.
Yeah. No,
I'm probably going to take a spin off of that, but I want to take this time from my perspective to say thank you to the Swambis. It was a delight when they arrived at your driveway. And I told Mr. Swami, I said, you never heard no. You never heard no about carrying through with this. She just, and Mark, I won't cut you short either, but it was amazing to me that they were willing to go to whatever cost, or work to follow through. And so on behalf of myself anyway, I say thank you.
And look who we have with us. This wonderful person and his family now. Wonderful. We're so happy for you.
Yeah. Oh, so delighted. That's such abundance of good news there. Yeah. So yeah. Well, I think we already discussed that. It's just like I'm just imagining, I guess again how could this play in a church that is not as I would say as loving as this one? Because maybe you do have to explain, what does it actually mean? What steps do you take? Who is your neighbor? Yeah, so if you want to go ahead, that shouldn't take too long. Yeah, and just to consider, well, actually, who is your neighbor is a question, I think is it the people who look like you, the one next door really, or is it really the stranger? And in a sense, I did want to bring up, I think it was asked of Bonnie, Rabbi Bonnie last time when she was here. I don't know how many of you were here, but so Rabbi Bunny is very, very beholden, or not beholden, but she really follows Voces de la Frontera. And they're very actively really living their scripture. And actually the church, the faith community that was always in contact with me when I was at Voces was the Jewish community. And that also made me like, do you think of where are the Christian churches? Why? Because they were providing funding, they were providing, and of course that community has felt in their person the impact of not being wanted, of being persecuted, of being made scapegoats, right? Of really dying for just being different. And they see very clearly. But I think Jesus's teachings would say we should also protect and even if it hasn't happened to you, right? It's your neighbor. It's like, so how, and just to make people real, what would you do if you had to leave everything you know, if you really had to leave, if you couldn't provide for your family, if you couldn't, just to put yourself in that spot, would you easily just like say, okay, yes, tomorrow I'm going to go and I don't know the language, and it's a tremendous endeavor, you know, people risking their lives, and they're now here and they're being so badly treated. I think it's just a consideration. I don't know if anybody has ever, I mean, I'm not going to ask why, because I know the answer, but I think, but if anybody else has ever considered that, like, what would it feel like if you really had to leave everything you know, all the people you love, just to have compassion for those people around you who have endured that, you know, just to come and work, be able to provide for their families. Anyhow.
Probably all of us have immigrant ancestors who came through some of these same things.
Yeah.
But much different 100 years ago, 150 years ago.
Yes, yeah, some people were provided land, right? Come and populate this area. Yeah, you push the name yourself, yeah. And the name of Christ. Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded again how Christian nationalism is really a force working against immigrant rights. They really perpetuate this theory called the replacement theory, that we're going to be, white Americans are going to be outnumbered before too long, and that's a threat to our nation, which is, so it's just another component of their whole platform.
Yeah, there is a lot of racism in this. Yeah. So what do we do? Oh, he took away, he has the answer.
I think about this a great deal in terms of gun violence.
Yeah.
And one big responsibility is to renounce it. To renounce it and say, no, that's not who we are.
Right.
As people of Christian faith, and to stand against it.
Yeah.
And then
Publicly, loudly. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know you. Yeah. Yeah, I think we have to do that. Be loud about what it means to be Christian. Yeah. I think we just have one more, and then we can. Okay. Yeah, no, I think we've covered that, and I don't know if Ngwa wants to speak, but I don't want to put you in that position. It's a if you don't want. Yes. Well, we just it was just to have the other consideration of people in that situation, which we know obviously happens, and it's even more of a desperate situation. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw in another population. I totally respect, you know, what this is about. But for those of you who may not have individuals with the brain disorders of serious and persistent mental illness, this is a time in this country where they are really beginning to be persecuted, as more of the mass shootings are occurring. And the fact that we've had the pandemic in its severity, it's still there, but so many people are having quote unquote mental health issues. And I say mental health, not mental illness. What is beginning to happen, and I said it in a previous adult forum, the muddying, this is my word, of mental health and the brain disorders of serious and persistent mental illness. And you're beginning to hear more of the leading politicians or people on, what do they call them, who are in charge of the news on,
Pundits or?
yeah, talking about mass shootings and people with mental health issues. So even Dylan called me the other day, my son, and said he's feeling a bit terrified by what is coming on the news. So we need to be aware that we are in a country where there's a lot of persecution going on.
Of the other.
Not solely, which is horrible, on the immigrant population, but on other populations.
Yeah. no,
We're
it's
in a
hard.
very sad state of affairs. Thank you.
Yeah. Well. Anyhow, okay. Oh, yeah. Of course.
So my plan with my personal plan with this video is that I have a connection, a very loose connection to a pastor in Sacs Prairie du Sac. He's an ELCA pastor, and the only connection I have is I went to a funeral at his church. But I would like to call them and ask them if we can show this video. It's a farming community, right? And see if we can have the same kind of discussion. And then my other, when I get my courage up to do this and when I'm not quite so busy at home, is to call Mark's home church that he grew up in Northwest Wisconsin and ask them if we can do the same thing there. And again, very much a farming community, quite a different, maybe it's not Madison, political mindset. And I would love to have those discussions with people. And so I think my challenge that I'm throwing out is, how many of you know relatives or people in the rest of Wisconsin where you would be willing to go to a church and have that discussion?
And I would be so
go.
happy to show this video where if you have connections like that, to send it out, please, and then try to be there for the discussion.
Bianca, thank you. Thank you for your work and for bringing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. Please let me know.
Next week is kind of the weekend by Earth Day, and we're going to have a speaker about Aldo Leopold. So I'm excited to hear about that work too. So we'll see you. Thanks.